My name is Kate Faulkner, and I was born in 1995 in Charleston, West Virginia. My heritage is of Midwestern farmers, and I have not developed much of a cultural identity for myself, as opposed to like my ethnic colleagues or my Ukrainian boyfriend. However, one identity that I strongly belong to is millennials. Now, millennials are a group of people that get thrown around with a bunch of different definitions depending on who's talking about it. For me, millennials is the generation that grew up when the internet was developed and has used the internet to raise themselves. This can include how we process information, where we get our information, how we communicate with others, and how it helps us grow into adulthood. Millennials have different ambitions than their parents do. I have a few friends of mine from college that are starting to get out and that they're happy to stay in an apartment their entire lives and forego having kids, as opposed to a generation beforehand where a mortgage and a family might have been more acceptable as something to pursue after you got your education, got settled down. Work-life balances are also becoming more and more apparent to millennials as something that's important to your career. Because of the information age, we can now work remotely. So going into the office for 40 to 50 hours a week and going home and keeping those two lives separate is starting to blur. There's less of a boundary between your home life and your work life. Because of using the internet as a way to spread information throughout different people and all of your friends, millennials are seen as more open-minded to social rights and civil rights than their predecessors. Just due to more information, we have more personal testimonies out there that we can hear from other people, see how their plights are, as opposed to having to read it in a newspaper even months after an incident has occurred. However, millennials, thanks to the internet, have developed an idea of instant gratification as opposed to our parents and our grandparents before us, who are seen as a more patient generation, willing to work at something for a while to get the result that comes out of it. As opposed to millennials, one of my favorite things to do is to watch a bunch of vines. They're just 6 seconds of video. It's a quick punchline. It's funny. I move on to the next one. It's a quick process of information and I'm done. It's a lot harder for me to sit down and watch an hour documentary now as an adult as opposed to when I was a child, just because I'm just so used to all this information coming at me super quick, easy to digest, and move on. Rises in college education, as well as the obligation to get a college education, have really affected millennials' views on finances. Although a college education is not needed for a good life in America, you could go to a vocational school or a trade school, a lot of people my age are under the impression that it is necessary. So they pursue these college educations at a price that is unaffordable to them, at student loan rates that cripple them into debt for 15 to 20 years. And this really can change a millennial's perspective on what's worth buying. Certain industries, such as the diamond industry, claim that they are dying thanks to the millennials, because millennials are not buying into what they're selling anymore. Thanks to the transference of information about market shares with diamonds, artificial inflation, fair sourcing of where the diamonds come from, millennials are opting out on buying them, seeing them as useless rocks that don't really mean anything, and would prefer to put their money towards other items. The millennial sense of humor is also developing in a different way from our parents, as sort of a cynic take on how we feel about the cultural, economic, and political environment that we're in right now. A lot of comics that I find funny to me, my parents don't quite understand. The punchlines don't fit, but that's the point. It's that there are these abstract concepts that are trying to take a topical viewpoint on things going on. One of my favorite images on the internet is someone just saying the word burger, but it is misspelled like borger. Somehow that is the funniest thing that I've ever seen, even though it's complete nonsense. We're seeing a resurgence of this type of humor of the Dadaism and the Daliism that was so prevalent in the 1980s come about again thanks to these economic downturns that are causing more and more young people to be cynical and turn to different types of humor. However, even though I am a millennial, I still hold a lot of the same ambitions that my parents do. I do not care to stay in an apartment my entire life, and although that might be out of a Texas cultural identity, I do prefer a little bit of land and some space to run around in. I was in New York last week and everyone was stacked on top of each other, and for my friends, that's a dream, but I could care less about living with everybody else. There are other notions of millennialism that I tend to reject. I don't like going online and posting comments and opinions everywhere where people can see it, although I know a lot of my friends will basically put their life story out on social media. I like to stay a lot more private about it because I understand that whatever you put out on the internet stays there forever. I try and think about if I was running for public office in 20 years, would I want someone to find that comment I made on Ariana Grande's new music video? Probably not. So as I develop, I will probably find new cultural identities throughout my life, and hopefully I can find something else that I can relate to more than just millennialism, and it'll be very interesting to see what the next generation comes up with. This is my audience.